Everyone, thank you for coming out. Thank you, media, for showing up and covering this story. My name is Omar Flores. I'm with the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And what we've seen recently is that the Waukesha Sheriff has released very limited footage as to what happened regarding the death of Brieon Green. They've only really released what might look convenient for them, but not necessarily the whole story. So today we're going to be hearing from people that have seen the footage, and also to correct the narrative, so that way the media just doesn't have access to only one narrative. So I'm going to be calling up Attorney Biavri Lamar first. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. On behalf of the Brieon Green family, residents, concerned parties of the city of Milwaukee, we thank you for your continued interest in this case as there have been developments. This has been a long road for the Brieon Green family, and we thank you all for tracking this story. At the onset, I feel like it's important to just talk about one of most central issues, which is just suicide awareness. Obviously, this is not Suicide Awareness Month. However, I think it is important and imperative that we discuss this issue. Foremost, individuals suffering from suicidal ideation, that's a mental illness. And they should be taken and considered and treated accordingly with being a mental illness. Brieon Green unfortunately suffered from this illness well before June 26th of last year. In fact, the sheriff department participated in a search and rescue for Brieon Green on or about April 25th of the year before. So approximately 2 months prior to the most tragic incident which that occurred in the county jail. The sheriff department was a part of the process in trying to rescue Brieon Green. So again, we think it's not a question as to whether there was notice that Brieon Green suffered from suicidal ideation. So now that brings us to June 26th. You are aware of this family, all the many protests that the Milwaukee Alliance, the Brieon Green Coalition, the family has participated in to get transparency, to have the open records released, to have this footage released. That unfortunately still has not happened. Here we are 7 months later, and we're still requesting for the same footage that this family observed back in December of last year to be released publicly. Now, what was released? There were several different statements, obviously the investigative reports that were released by the sheriff's office, but the most material aspect of what transpired back on June 26th was not released. And that is simply the footage of Brieon Green unfortunately strangling himself with a phone cord, but most importantly, the sheriff deputy who walked by indifferently as Brieon Green was in the course of doing so. We want that footage to be released immediately. So not just different parts that, as Omar just shared that serves this particular narrative, but the entirety. This family deserves it, the community deserves it, and for the sake of us all and the protection of all the inmates and citizens and residents of this state, you're entitled to that. So we want to make sure that we have these protections in place, that there are procedures and protocols being followed so that we don't have another incident of a suicide that takes place at the county jail. Now, I also want to bring attention that going specific to what was released, there were reports that indicated that there was a Shepherdie deputy on the transport with Brieon Green in the vehicle that indicated that Brieon Green was hitting his head against the window of the vehicle. We find that particularly important. There are certain assessments in an intake process that must be adhered to and followed to make sure that the well-being of inmates are always protected. And we believe that an indication of a display of behavior that Brieon Green showed back on June 26th, hitting his head repeatedly against a window, would be demonstrative of an individual who has issues, who is mentally disturbed at that particular point. The video that was released that shows Brieon Green in the back of the squad car, unfortunately, we have issues with that video that was released. Particularly, there are certain parts of the video that is stopped and the timestamps are off at particular points. Now, we don't know if that's just a glitch. We don't really know what to make of that, but there's several points in intervals of 7 seconds, 10 seconds. In another part, there's almost a 15-second gap, whereas this family is not able to see exactly what took place during that patrol ride. Now, in the reports, it's also indicated that the sheriff deputy stated that while Brieon Green was hitting his head, he was only doing it for some attention. That's in the police reports. Like he's banging his head against a window for attention. I mean, let's just think about that for a second. And that is why training is very imperative to have with law enforcement agencies, correctional officers, and so forth, to make sure that we can properly identify individuals who are suffering from suicidal ideation. So the medical examiner report, Ms. Dunlap has had access to that in the autopsy. It's indicative that Brieon Green suffered a concussion. And we believe that that concussion is a direct result of him hitting his head on that window. Now, we're looking for the video that shows when Brieon Green was doing so. We want to see the video of Brieon Green hitting his head against the window of the squad car. So again, that's why open records is important. That's why we got to have checks and balances. That's why accountability is imperative for a community. Now, so here we are today. Obviously, you see the family. We're looking for the release of the whole video. For the sheriff's office to cite to not give the video, particularly with the correctional officer walking past, and they cite security concerns. Well, who cared about Brieon Green's security and his safety on June 26th of last year? There were so many opportunities in which somebody could have said something just is not right with this young man. Obviously, he was a special needs student. Obviously, even in the video with it, we watched the video and we don't see him just being very deliberate with answering any questions during the intake process. Again, that is another way in which you can tell that an individual is suffering from something. He should not have been placed into a cell at all. We think that he should have been probably referred to the mental hospital instead of going into the county jail for the protection and, of his well-being. But again, the other part that we find very concerning, which the public has not been able to see the video, is that Brieon Green was transferred into a cell immediately after allegedly going through an intake process. But he was taken from a cell that we believe did not have a phone inside of it, and instead placed into a cell with a phone. All right, so that's important, because why are we putting an individual who is displaying this type of suicidal behavior into a cell in which he can harm himself? More importantly, why were there not cell checks performed? Cell checks are supposed to be performed 30 minutes in 30-minute intervals. The reports that we've read, and again, what has taken the sheriff's office almost 7 months to investigate, we've been very intentional in reviewing over the last 48 hours. There's reports from inmates inside of the county jail that indicate that there were no cell checks performed at all. In fact, they indicate that the correctional officers were by a computer laughing for almost a 2.5-hour period of time as they were watching something on the computer. So again, it's important. There's nothing we can do about the loss of life as it relates to Brieon Green, but we're here today to try to ensure that the appropriate checks and balances and protocols are in place to prevent the loss of future life. With that being said, I'm gonna refer back to the Milwaukee Alliance.
And to reiterate some of these points, I'm going to be calling up Lon Chavoya with the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. He's going to be discussing about some of the efforts that we've taken over the past few years here in Milwaukee to demand for footage transparency, just general transparency around the sheriff and the police as a whole. Alon is also somebody that was able to see the footage of what happened to Brieon in the cell and provide a narrative that hasn't really been offered to the media, at least in full video form. So Alon, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Alan Chavoya, Outreach Chair of the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. 7 months ago today, Brieon Green was arrested at Bradford Beach. A few hours later, Brieon was found dead in his holding cell while in the supposed care of the Milwaukee County Jail. After months of marches and rallies demanding the release of footage pertaining to Brieon's death, we were able to watch some of that footage last month. The footage we watched was from inside the jail. It showed a correctional officer performing a so-called wellness check on Brieon. The wellness check consisted of this CO walking rapidly past Brieon's cell, glancing briefly inside, I'm talking about less than a second, and continuing to walk past as Brieon had already began to wrap the phone cord around his neck. At a meeting last week with Sheriff Ball, she actually told us that wellness checks, as per their standard operating procedure, are supposed to be conducted every 15 minutes. The next wellness check on Brieon, following that initial one, came 37 minutes after. What we saw showed us that Brieon's death was preventable. The footage shows us that there are serious problems with how the sheriff's office is running the county jail. Earlier this week, we saw the footage that Waukesha County Sheriff's Department released. They decided to release only footage of Brieon's arrest. No footage from inside the jail has been publicly released. Partial transparency in these kinds of cases is as good as no transparency at all. We have been demanding since last year, and even further, full transparency, something that neither Waukesha nor Milwaukee sheriffs have been willing to comply with. It's important to look at the consequences and the impact of this decision to release partial footage. Releasing footage of Breon's arrest without any context about his time inside the jail, it only serves to depict Brieon as uncooperative and as someone who the public should not be caring about. It takes the attention away from the conditions inside the county jail, which has had 3 deaths in the last 7 months. When we have spoken with authorities at the county sheriff's office, with the district attorney, with the police department, and with the fire and police commission, we've been talking about our footage, about having footage of cases involving officer misconduct released within 48 hours, and the names of officers to be released in 24 hours. Every time we talk to them about those demands, we're always told that such level of transparency could possibly, and I say possibly because that's what they only talk about, speculation, that they could possibly interfere with the investigations and possible trials. So the reasoning is that the public release of footage could, in some sense, sway public opinion in one way or another. Well, why does that only apply to these kinds of cases? Huh? Why does it never apply to this? Why is it only when officers behave in criminal ways that there can't be transparency? Why is it when they fail to do their job that there isn't transparency? And why is it that when there's footage that might make a victim look a little bit bad, that they release it right away? This also impacts public perception of the case, but they release it because it justifies the officers involved. And this isn't simply an issue of Milwaukee. This is a national issue. Transparency from law enforcement does not exist. A few weeks ago, Tyree Nichols was violently killed by Memphis police. Rather than letting the public see the entire footage, only the aftermath of that brutal incident is shown. Also a few weeks ago, Manuel Esteban Paez Terán, also known as Tortuguita, was killed by Atlanta police, and they're refusing to release any footage. They're even claiming that there isn't footage when photos of the incident show that they had body cameras on prior to killing Tortuguita. Law enforcement across the nation does not want transparency. They drag their feet and offer a laundry list of excuses as to why they can't release footage in a timely manner. And when they do release footage, it's footage that aims to make law enforcement look like the good guys and the victims as people who deserved it. What Waukesha did this week isn't transparency. It's a fabrication of a narrative that fits this agenda. The agenda that law enforcement are benevolent and that Black lives don't matter. We are demanding that the entire footage of this case be released publicly. We're demanding an end to the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office internal investigation. We're demanding robust policy changes to the way that the County Sheriff's Office operates the county jail. We're demanding a public town hall from Sheriff Danita Ball to answer people's questions about what's going on in this jail. We're demanding no more deaths inside county jail. We're demanding a policy that grants public release of footage of cases involving police misconduct within 48 hours and the release of the names of officers in those cases to be released in 24 hours. That's what we're demanding. That's what we've been demanding for the last year. That's what we've been demanding with the Justice for Brieon Green Coalition, with the family of Brieon Green. Justice for who?
Brieon Green!
Justice for who?
Brieon Green!
Justice for who?
Brieon Green!
That's right, thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for those powerful words. The police have been fighting back hard against us, fighting for any sort of transparency, and this is because they love to have a grip on the narrative. And again, we want to thank the media for showing up today, for helping us get out the alternative narrative. You know, and this isn't a narrative that's come up with in people's heads. This is a narrative that's come out from being able to actually see all of the footage. I'm personally convinced, and I'm sure everyone here is convinced, that if everyone got to see this footage, that everyone would be on the same page as us, that it was a very unjust death and a totally preventable death that Brieon had faced. And so up next, I'm going to be calling up Laquita Dunlop, who is Brieon Green's mother.
Hello, my name is Laquita Dunlop, and I'm Brieon Green's mother. Brieon was my only son. He had a twin sister, which was Brianna Green. And, you know, we've been here day in and day out. It's 7 months now, and still no transparency. I don't know what's so hard about them releasing the footage from inside the jail, because it didn't expose any other people in there. You know, it didn't show exactly what happened to my son being neglected at the time that he needed help, at the time that he needed the guard to check in on him to do his job, what he was paid for. He didn't. He walked past my son just like, you know, he was nobody. and I want accountability. I want justice. I want the truth to come out. I want the people to see what we saw. They create this narrative that that he's a felon and all this, man. But he was my child, a person that had special problems. Right? He was never convicted, never charged with anything. My son was not a felon. My son, had mental problems and issues, and he deserved to be loved just like anybody else.
Make that known that he wasn't a felon. That's all we do.
It's not a legal court.
We're now going to open it up to the media for any questions regarding what was discussed today.
I think that what full access of the investigative file, I think that poses a lot of questions. I think that it suggests that the sheriff's department did know that Brieon Green suffered from suicidal ideation. I think that it was, with the evidence of him banging his head on the door, on the window, and then also with the way in which he answered questions, which we don't really believe that he really deliberately answered any of those questions. We think it was a lot of gibberish. Brieon Green had a problem being able to communicate effectively, competently in a lot of regards, and that should have been picked up by the intake staff. To put him in a cell where there's not a phone, and for some reason, which is unbeknownst to us at this time, while he was transferred into another cell, we think raises questions. So again, I think that we want the full access of the entirety of the file so that we can, put two and two together ourselves, and then perhaps that issue might not need to be reopened as it relates to criminal culpability. I will tell you that we are going to be holding every individual that we believe is accountable and liable. We are doing an assessment at this time, looking at all the different things that went wrong here, what protocols were broken. We are also looking for the photograph of the actual phone that was used by Brieon Green. There might be some liability with the manufacturer of that phone as well. So we are waiting to get that information, and that might have to occur after we commence a lawsuit. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.